I had a horrible, horrible reading month. One single book. So I did not do an April wrap up. So my May wrap up contains the one book I read in April, and we're gonna call it a spring wrap up. That one book that I did manage to read during the month of April was The Animators. And this was 100% a cover buy. This and then this on the shelf at my local used bookstore. I was like, I need to bring that home with me. It is about two best friends who meet in college, and they are both in the animation industry, and they have a comic, like cartoon together, a show, and they are working on projects and constantly trying to like make the next best thing. This book really just like dives into the intricacies of their lives and then some of the big hurdles that they face as women in such a transparent industry, but then also what might happen to you if you were to go publish fictional content that is not so fictional and obviously tied to people who are close to you, their real life experiences. It's a little bit of a villain story because maybe these people didn't do the best thing or make the strongest choices or use as much creative freedom as they had at their fingertips when it came to story building. Another tricky thing about this is like reading a book about animation where like you aren't seeing any of the animation, but that made for a lot of really fun descriptors, and like the language within this book is just creative, and I really appreciated that. Also, I will point out, surprise lesbian character. I feel like I'm always just seeking out very intentionally my queer reads, so to just have somebody pop up that I happen to identify with was actually super refreshing. And kind of finished April with starting Colson Whitehead's Harlem Shuffle. This was just not the time to read this book. The way it is chunked out, it is part 1, 2, and 3, just did not create the movement that I needed coming out of such a slump. So I had a really hard time wanting to pick this up. The two books that I did read in like my slumpiest part of my slump were books that I needed to get off my physical TBR as part of my like goal this year to read more of those books. My book club with my friends, our book of the month was Coming Home by Brittney Griner. 'Tis the season for the WNBA, so this was perfect timing to pick this up, especially because she just had a team switch, so kind of interesting. But this goes through a little bit of her life and how she gets into basketball and like growing up and finding the sport, and then a little bit of basketball, and then boom, her whole experience with being detained in Russia. I couldn't stop trying to look through the lens of like, what is Brittney's story and what is Michelle Buford's writing? Like, where's the line here? Can I find it? So that kind of had me distracted, and that's like a game that I don't even know if I'm winning while I'm playing it. Fun is absolutely not the right word to describe this book, but it felt fun to get to know more about like this person who I watch play this sport. At the end of the day, she broke a law for a country that she was visiting, and she did what happens to you when you break that law and that rule there. Reading this makes it even more crazy that we did bring her back and we did do a trade. Like, I am actually mind blown about how it all got resolved in, yes, pushing 300 days in Russian prison is probably a really terrible, horrifying experience. Maybe they'd held off and they'd waited a little bit to put out a book like this until she was more settled back here, could get into the swing of like having another good season of basketball, because I read this and I don't think she would just be going about her life not trying to do some sort of advocacy work, because it just kind of like ends at her not being in her best physical shape to have a good competitive season after having been a prisoner in Russia for almost 300 days. Next, I read one of my most anticipated books ever, On Her Terms by Amy Spalding. This is the third book in the Out in Hollywood series. I hope it's an ongoing series. I hope this is not the final book to it. This follows two characters in a queer friend group who frequent a queer location that you meet in like the other books. You know some of the friends from this story from the other books. So like there's a lot that feels familiar, but Amy Spalding is still great at introducing you to new characters. But you could still read it like a standalone because you're meeting these characters for the first time. Clem, who's coming out of a really long-term relationship with her boyfriend, and then you've got Chloe, who is a little bit of like a hard to tie down, constantly going on dates, won't settle kind of situation, and you find out that Chloe has been kind of pining after Clem, and they hatch a fake dating plan, and you can guess how that goes. But I just truly think that Amy Spalding is constantly including the perfect queer pop culture references into her writing, and it feels like you're truly just like reading a queer story here. I think I'm constantly talking about it, so I'm going to shut up now. Following that, I would have some high expectations, so I decided to go for another book that has been on my physical TBR ledge for quite some time, Landline by Rowell. I know that rainbow books are like cozy. That's kind of what I wanted. I know that the humor is there. I know that the pacing and all of the movement and the action in what may seem just to be like dialogue scenes really just like keeps you going and flipping through the pages. I also knew that this one, you've got a main character who has a job in not quite animation but television, which kind of tied back to that Animators book that I started this whole spring reading journey with. I just truly enjoyed this, and I think that this is a case in point for saving books that you know you'll enjoy for the best or most optimal time to enjoy them. Like this, I savored it, and it was like a little treat, even though it's been on my shelf for years. Somehow I waited for the perfect time to read it, and I nailed it. This story is about a magic phone. You have a wife who finds out that an old phone that she has the ability to transport her like back in time conversationally with her husband, and it puts into perspective the current trouble she's having in her relationship with her family, with her kids, with her husband, with her best friend. It's just like a ridiculous concept, and you just immediately buy into it because Rowell's writing is so addictive. So that was it. I feel like I'm more like into it. I'm good. I'm going. How many books? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books and a handful of comic books. And I feel ready to cruise into June. I feel like the slump is in my past. I've got such a good lineup of queer reads for Pride, and I know that I'm going to just fly through them and enjoy the summer weather and drinks on patios with books in hand. So happy spring, happy Pride. I hope you have good books to read in June too.